Here we go. In Hyderabad, after a Pandal lecture program, a teenaged Indian boy spent the night with the devotees. The next morning, he entered Srila Prabhupada's room along with the initiated devotees and sat down close to Prabhupada. As soon as Prabhupada saw the boy, he pointed to the door without saying a word. The boy also said nothing but got up and left. Srila Prabhupada then turned to one of the sannyasis and said, "First, he must wash all the pots." He explained that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had always first tested the sincerity of someone who wanted to join by asking him to wash pots. In Japan, Srila Prabhupada rode the monorail. At first, the seat in front of him was empty, and Burijan Das invited Prabhupada to put his feet up there, since the seats were uncomfortably cramped. The empty seat was actually reserved for one of Prabhupada's disciples, Banu Das, and the monorail authorities finally insisted that everyone must sit in his own seat. Burijan then again turned to Srila Prabhupada, this time with trepidation. "Srila Prabhupada, one of the devotees has to sit down. Will you remove your lotus feet?" "Yes," Srila Prabhupada replied. "I will move my feet so that the lotus-like devotee can sit down." Wow, talking about Banu Das at the time. Shatadanya Maharaj was talking with Srila Prabhupada in his room in Mayapur when he discovered that ants were crawling over Prabhupada's desk. Shatadanya stood and began pushing away the ants with light brushing motions of his cloth. Peacefully sitting back against the bolster pillows, Prabhupada watched and commented, "Before you would have killed them, but now you are purified." One time on a walk, Prabhupada was explaining how the paper currency is a cheating process. He said that the government encourages people to work hard in the factories to develop the economy of the nation, and yet they pay them only pieces of paper. When the government doesn't have enough pieces of paper, they print up more, and thus the whole economy is based on cheating. Prabhupada said that the Vedic economy is based on the bartering system. If the bartering system is not possible, then at least the gold standard should be used, because the gold has some value and the quantity of gold is limited. After hearing Prabhupada describe the ideal economy based on the Vedic civilization, one devotee asked, "But if all transactions are done in gold, it would be very difficult to make large deals, because to carry the gold and exchange it would be very cumbersome." "That's very good," replied Prabhupada. "Why should there be big transactions? Big transactions mean that people are accumulating more than they require. We don't want big transactions. We want each person to have what they require." Prabhupada told a proverb about money. One man asked another, "Are you intelligent?" The second man started to look in his pockets. The first man asked, "Why are you looking in your pockets?" The second man said, "Well, if there is any money there, that means I'm intelligent." Prabhupada explained, "Actually, in our movement, everything is going on by intelligence and your cooperation. So you are preaching very intelligently, but if there is not money, then where is the intelligence? I must not be very intelligent." Prabhupada instructed that 50% of income should go to the book fund, and 50% should go to construction or other projects. He said that the Krishna conscious movement was, in one sense, just like a business, and so it should be run in that way. In other words, it was on the basis of his books that the movement was getting its collections, whether by life membership or book sales. Therefore, just as in any business, the capital assets had to be invested in. You must therefore give 50% of your money to the book fund. We should live on a paltry income, whatever we receive by selling our magazines, but in dire necessity, when there is no other way, we may accept some service temporarily. But on principle, we should go on Sankirtan, not work. So whatever Krishna gives us, we should accept on that principle. You are a senior member of the society, you should have known all these things. Anyway, send them back on Sankirtan. All the Amsterdam devotees should be engaged in Sankirtan, not in a cigarette factory. Prabhupada approved of his disciples making ambitious plans for spreading Krishna consciousness. But Prabhupada, one devotee asked, how are we going to get money to do all this? Prabhupada said, you make the plans, Krishna will provide the money. Concerning Ganesh worship, it is not actually necessary for us. But if someone has the sentiment for getting the blessings of Ganesh to get large amounts of money for Krishna service, then it is all right. But anyone who takes up this kind of worship must send me at least $100,000 monthly, not less. If he cannot send this amount, he cannot do Ganesh worship. Wow, that's amazing. Srila Prabhupada was not keen on banking money. As soon as there will be money in the bank, he said, there will be headache, this tax and that tax. Prabhupada said, we have no problems. Although we have so much money, if we were to lose that money, still we would not be hampered in our mission. Ahoitikiya pratihata, without being checked. Krishna consciousness is prosecuted in pure devotion. Yes, one of the devotees agreed, even if we had to write the books out by hand and distribute them. In Australia, Srila Prabhupada was waiting in an airport terminal for a delayed flight. He asked Amoga Das to go to the desk to find out the departure time. The desk clerk answered that the new boarding time would be in 15 minutes. Srila Prabhupada heard this, but after 20 minutes, when there was no call, he asked the devotee to check again. Again, the report was 15 minutes. Srila Prabhupada kept looking at his watch every 15 minutes and asking the devotee to find out more information. After some time, Prabhupada told a story. He said that a man once testified in a court case that he had been 50 years old for the last 15 years, and he claimed that due to honesty, he had not wished to change his statement. So Srila Prabhupada said, still, they say 15 minutes to boarding time. That is honesty. It is 1 hour and 15 minutes, and still they do not change their word. 15 minutes. One of Prabhupada's Bengali stories was about a doctor visiting a house to diagnose two patients, a rich housewife and her maidservant. The doctor said, the maidservant's fever is 105 degrees, so there is some anxiety. I will give her some medicine. But the landlady of the house has practically no fever, 99 degrees, so there is no anxiety for her. When she heard this, the landlady became angry and said, this doctor is useless. I'm the landlady. I've only got 99 degrees and my maidservant has 105. The maidservant should have 98 and I should have 110. Prabhupada compared this to the modern civilization, which is inclined to increase the degree of its fever up to 110. As in the human body, there is death as soon as the temperature reaches 107. So Prabhupada said that by the nuclear weapons, modern civilization will come to the point of 107 and over. But devotees want to decrease the fever by living the highest ideal life and decreasing the demands of the body. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Udama Bhava Pushanam. Udama Bhava Pushanam Alaguhasa Vridavaloka Nihato Madano Piyasam Samuya Chapa Majahat Pramadotamashta Yasindriyam Vimatitum Kuhakir Nashekuhu. Although the queen's beautiful smiles and furtive glances were all spotless and exciting, and although they could conquer Cupid himself, by making him give up his bow in frustration. And although even the tolerant Shiva could fall victim to them, still, despite all their magical feats and attractions, they could not agitate the senses of the Lord. Purport: the path of salvation, or the path going back to Godhead, always forbids the association of women, and the complete Sanatan Dharma or Varnashram Dharma scheme forbids or restricts association with women. How then can one be accepted as a Supreme Personality Godhead who's addicted to more than 16,000 wives? This question may be relevantly raised by inquisitive persons really anxious to know about the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. And to answer such questions, the sages of Naimisharanya have discussed the transcendental character of the Lord in this and in following verses. It is clear herein that the feminine attractive features which can conquer Cupid, or even the supermost tolerant Lord Shiva, could not conquer the senses of the Lord. Cupid's business is to invoke mundane lust. The whole universe is moving, the whole universe is moving, being agitated by Cupid's arrow. The activities of the world are being carried on. The activities of the world are being carried on by the sensual attraction of male and female. A male is searching after a mate to his liking, and the female is looking after a suitable male. That is the way of material stimulus. And as soon as a male is combined with a female, the material bondage of the living being is at once tightly interlocked by sex relation. And as a result of this, both the male's and female's attraction for sweet home, motherland, bodily offspring, society and friendship, and accumulation of wealth becomes the illusory field of activities, and thus a false but indefatigable attraction for the temporary material existence, which is full of miseries, is manifest. Those who are, therefore, on the path of salvation for going back home, back to Godhead, are especially advised by all scriptural instructions to become free from such paraphernalia of material attraction. And that is possible only by the association of the devotees of the Lord who are called the Mahatmas. Cupid throws his arrow upon the living beings to make them mad after the opposite sex, whether the party is actually beautiful or not. Cupid's provocations are going on, even among beastly societies, who are all ugly looking in the estimation of the civilized nations. Thus, Cupid's influence is exerted even amongst the ugliest forms, and what to speak of the most perfect beauties. Lord Shiva, who is considered to be most tolerant, was also struck by Cupid's arrow because he also became mad after the Mohini incarnation of the Lord and acknowledged himself to be defeated. Cupid, however, was himself captivated by the grave and exciting dealings of the goddesses of fortune, and he voluntarily gave up his bow and arrow in a spirit of frustration. Such was the beauty and attraction of the queens of Lord Krishna. Yet they could not disturb the transcendental senses of the Lord. This is because the Lord is all perfect Atma Rama, or self-sufficient. He does not require anyone's extraneous help for his personal satisfaction. Therefore, the queens could not satisfy the Lord by their feminine attractiveness, but they satisfied him by their sincere affection and service. Only by unalloyed transcendental loving service could they satisfy the Lord, and the Lord was pleased to treat them as wives in reciprocation. Thus, being satisfied by their unalloyed service only, the Lord reciprocated the service just like a devout husband. Otherwise, he had no business becoming the husband of so many wives. He is the husband of everyone, but to one who accepts him as such he reciprocates. This unalloyed affection for the Lord is never to be compared to mundane lust. It is purely transcendental, and the grave dealings which the queens displayed in natural feminine ways were also transcendental because the feelings were expressed out of transcendental ecstasy. It is already explained in the previous verse that the Lord appeared like a mundane husband, but if actually his relation with his wives was transcendental, pure, and unconditioned by the modes of material nature. Text 37, tamayam manyate loko yasang api sanginam atmalpam yenam anujam vyaprinvanam yato buddha. The common materialistic conditioned souls speculate that the Lord is one of them. Out of their ignorance, they think that the Lord is affected by matter, although he is unattached. Purport: the word of Buddha is significant here. Due to ignorance only, they foolish, mundane wranglers misunderstand the Supreme Lord and spread their foolish imaginations amongst innocent persons by propaganda. The Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is the original primeval personality of Godhead, and when he was personally present before the eyes of everyone, he displayed full fledged divine potency in every field of activities. As we have already explained in the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, he is completely independent to act however he likes, but all his actions are full of bliss, knowledge, and eternity. Only the foolish mundaners misunderstand him, unaware of his eternal form of knowledge and bliss, which is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads. His different potencies work in a perfect plan of natural sequence and doing everything by the agency of his different potencies. He remains eternally the supreme independent. When he descends in the material world by his causeless mercy to different living beings, he does so by his own potency. He is not subject to any condition of the material modes of nature, and he descends as he is originally. The mental speculators misunderstand him as the supreme person, and they consider his impersonal features as inexplicable Brahman to be all. Such a conception is also the product of conditioned life, because they cannot go beyond their own personal capacity. Therefore, one who considers the Lord on the level of one's limited potency is only a common man. Such a man cannot be convinced that the personality of Godhead is always unaffected by the modes of material nature. He cannot understand that the sun is always unaffected by infectious matter. The mental speculators compare everything from the standpoint of experimental knowledge of their own selves. Thus, when the Lord is found to act like an ordinary person in matrimonial bondage, they consider him to be like one of them, without considering that the Lord can at once marry 16,000 wives or more. Due to a poor fund of knowledge, they accept one side of the picture while disbelieving the other. This means that, due to ignorance only, they always think of Lord Krishna as like themselves and make their own conclusions, which are absurd and unauthentic from the version of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Text 38. This is the divinity of the personality of Godhead. He is not affected by the qualities of material nature, even though he is in contact with them. Similarly, the devotees who have taken shelter of the Lord do not become influenced by the material qualities. Purport. In the Vedas and the Vedic literatures, Shruti and Smriti, it is affirmed that in the divinity there is nothing material. He is transcendental, nirguna only, the supreme cognizant. Hari, or the personality of Godhead, is the supreme transcendental person situated beyond the range of material affection. These statements are also confirmed even by Acharya Shankar. One may argue that his relation with the goddesses of fortune may be transcendental, but what about his relation with the Yadu dynasty, being born in that family, or his killing the non believers like Jarasandha and other asuras, directly in contact with the modes of material nature? The answer is that the divinity of the personality Godhead is never in contact with the qualities of material nature in any circumstances. Actually, he is in contact with such qualities. Actually, he is in contact with such qualities because he is the ultimate source of everything. Yet he is above the actions of such qualities. He is he is known therefore as Yogeshvara, or the master of mystic power, or in other words, the all powerful. Even his learned devotees are not affected by the influence of the material modes. The great six Goswamis of Vrindavan all came from greatly rich and aristocratic families, But when they adopted the life of mendicants at Vrindavan, superficially they appeared to be in wretched conditions of life, but factually they were the richest of all in spiritual values. Such Mahabhagavats, or first grade devotees, although moving amongst men, are not contaminated by honor or insult, hunger or satisfaction, sleep or wakefulness, which are all resultant actions of the three modes of material nature. Similarly, some of them are engaged in worldly dealings, yet are unaffected. Unless, unless these neutralities of life are there, one cannot be considered situated in transcendence. The divinity and his associates are on the same transcendental plane, and their glories are always sanctified by the action of Yoga Maya. Their glories are always sanctified by the action of Yoga Maya, or the internal potency of the Lord. The devotees of the Lord are always transcendental, even if they are sometimes found to have fallen in their behavior. The Lord emphatically declares in the Bhagavad Gita 9:30 that even if an unalloyed devotee is found to be fallen due to a previous material contamination, he is nevertheless to be accepted as fully transcendental because of his being engaged 10% in the devotional service of the Lord. The Lord protects him always because of his rendering service unto him, and the fallen conditions are to be considered accidental and temporary. They will vanish in no time. Text 39. The simple and delicate women truly thought that Lord Sri Krishna, their beloved husband, followed them and was dominated by them. They were unaware of the extent of the glories of their husband, as the atheists are unaware of him as the supreme controller. Purport. Even the transcendental wives of Lord Sri Krishna did not know completely the unfathomable glories of the Lord. This ignorance is not mundane because there is some action of the internal potency of the Lord in the exchange of feelings between him and his eternal associates. The Lord exchanges transcendental relations in five ways as proprietor, master, friend, son, and lover, and in each of these pastimes he plays fully by the potency of Yoga Maya, the internal potency. He plays exactly like an equal friend with the cowherd boys, or even with friends like Arjuna. He plays exactly like a son in the presence of Yashoda Mata. He plays exactly like a lover in the presence of the cowherd, exactly like a husband in the presence of the queens of Dwarka. Such devotees of the Lord never think of the Lord as the supreme, but think of him exactly as a common friend, a pet son, or a lover or husband very much dear to heart and soul. That is the relation between the Lord and his transcendental devotees who act as his associates in the spiritual sky, where there are innumerable Vaikuntha planets. When the Lord descends, he does so when the Lord descends, he does so along with his entourage to display a complete picture of the transcendental world, where pure love and devotion for the Lord prevail without any mundane tinge of lording it over the creation of the Lord. Such devotees of the Lord are all liberated souls, perfect representations of the marginal or internal potency, in complete negation of the influence of the external potency. The wives of Lord Krishna were made to forget the immeasurable glories of the Lord by the internal potency, so that there might not be any flaw of exchange, and was a henpecked husband, always following them in lonely places. In other words, even the personal associates of the Lord do not know him perfectly well. So, what do the thesis writers or mental speculators know about the transcendental glories of the Lord? The mental speculators present different theses as to his becoming the causes of the creation, the ingredients of the creation, or the material and efficient cause of the creation, etc. But all this is but partial knowledge about the Lord. Factually, they are as ignorant as the common man. The Lord can be known by the mercy of the Lord only, and by no other means. But since the dealings of the Lord with his wives are based on pure transcendental love and devotion, the wives are all on the transcendental plane without material contamination. Thus in the 11th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, entitled Lord Krishna's entrance into Dwarka. Chapter 12, Birth of Emperor Parikshit. Text 1. Shonaka Vacha Ashvatamno Pasrishtena Brahma Shirshnoru Tejasa Uttaraya Hato Garba Ishena Jivata Punaha. The sage Shonaka said, the womb of Uttara, mother of Maharaj Parikshit, was spoiled by the dreadful and invincible Brahmastra weapon released by Ashvatthama. But Maharaj Parikshit was saved by the Supreme Lord. Purport. The sages assembled in the forest of Naimisharanya inquired from Sutta Goswami about the birth of Maharaj Parikshit. But in the course of the narration, other topics like the release of the Brahmastra by the son of Jonah, his punishment by Arjuna, Queen Kunti Devi's prayers, the Pandavas' visit to the place where Bhishma Deva was lying, his prayers, and thereafter the Lord's departure for Dwarka were discussed. Dwarka and residing with the 16,000 queens, etc., were narrated. The sages were absorbed in hearing such descriptions, but now they wanted to turn to the original topic, and thus the inquiry was made by Shonaka Rishi. So the subject of the release of the Brahmastra weapon by Ashvatthama is renewed. Text 2. How was the great emperor Parikshit, who was a highly intelligent and great devotee, born in that womb? How did his death take place, and what did he achieve after his death? How did his death take place, and what did he achieve after his death? Purport. The king of Hastinapur, now Delhi, used to be the emperor of the world, at least till the time of the son of Emperor Parikshit. Maharaj Parikshit was saved by the Lord in the womb of his mother, so he could certainly be saved from an untimely death due to the ill will of the son of a Brahmana. Because the aged Kali began to act just after the assumption of power by Maharaj Parikshit, the first sign of misgivings was exhibited in the cursing of such a greatly intelligent and devoted king as Maharaj Parikshit. The king is the protector of the helpless citizens, and their welfare, peace, and prosperity depend on him. Unfortunately, by the instigation of the fallen aged Kali, an unfortunate Brahmana son was employed to condemn the innocent Maharaj Parikshit, and so the king had to prepare himself for death within 7 days. Maharaj Parikshit is especially famous as one who was protected by Vishnu, and when he was unduly cursed by a Brahmana's son, he could have invoked the mercy of the Lord to save him, but he did not want to because he was a pure devotee. A pure devotee never asked the Lord for any undue favor. Maharaj Parikshit knew that the cause of the Brahmana's son upon him was unjustified, as everyone else knew, but he did not want to counteract it because he knew also that the age of Kali had begun, and the first symptom of the age, namely degradation of the highly talented Brahmana community, had also begun. He did not want to interfere with the current of the time, but he prepared himself to meet death very cheerfully and very properly. Being fortunate, he got at least 7 days to prepare himself to meet death, and so he properly utilized the time in the association of Shukadeva Goswami, the great saint and devotee of the Lord. Text 3. We all respectfully want to hear about him, Maharaj Parikshit, to whom Shukadeva Goswami imparted transcendental knowledge. Please speak on this matter. Purport. Shukadeva Goswami imparted transcendental knowledge to Maharaj Parikshit during the remaining 7 days of his life, and Maharaj Parikshit heard him properly, just like an ardent student. The effect of such a bona fide hearing and chanting of Srimad Bhagavatam was equally shared by both the hearer and the chanter. Both of them were benefited. Out of the 9 different transcendental means of devotional service to the Lord prescribed in the Bhagavatam, either all of them or some of them, or even one of them, are equally beneficial if properly discharged. Maharaj Parikshit and Shukadeva Goswami were serious performers. The first two important items, namely the process of chanting and the process of hearing, and therefore both of them were successful in their laudable attempt. Transcendental realization is obtained by such serious hearing and chanting, and not otherwise. Transcendental realization is attained by such serious hearing and chanting, and not otherwise. There is a type of spiritual master and disciple much advertised in this age of Kali. It is said that the master injects spiritual force into the disciple by an electric current generated by the master, and the disciple begins to feel the shock. He becomes unconscious, and the master weeps for his exhausting his store of so called spiritual assets. Such bogus advertisement is going on in this age, and the poor common man is becoming the victim of such advertisement. We do not find such folk tales in the dealings of Shukadeva Goswami and his great disciple Maharaj Parikshit. The sage recited Srimad Bhagavatam in devotion, and the great king heard him properly. The king did not feel any shock of electric current from the master, nor did he become unconscious while receiving knowledge from the master. One should not therefore become a victim of these unauthorized advertisements made by some bogus representative of Vedic knowledge. The sages of Naimisharanya were very respectful in hearing about Maharaj Parikshit because of his receiving knowledge from Shukadeva Goswami by means of ardent hearing. Ardent hearing from the bona fide master is the only way to receive transcendental knowledge, and there is no need for medical performances or occult mysticism for miraculous effects. The process is simple, but only the sincere party can achieve the desired result. Text 4. Sri Sutta Goswami said, Emperor Yudhishthira administered generously to everyone during his reign. He was exactly like his father. He had no personal ambition and was freed from all sorts of sense gratification because of his continuous service unto the lotus feet of the Lord Sri Krishna. Purport, as mentioned in our introduction, quote, there is a need for the science of Krishna in human society for all the suffering humanity of the world, and we simply request the leading personalities of our nations to take to the science of Krishna for their own good, for the good of society, and for the good of all the people of the world. So it is confirmed herein by the example of Maharaj Yudhishthira, the personality of goodness. In India, the people hankered after Rama Rajya because the personality Godhead was the ideal king, and all other kings or emperors in India controlled the destiny of the world for the prosperity of every living being who took birth on the earth. Herein, the word prajaha is significant. The etymological import of the word is that which is born. On the earth, there are many species of life, from the aquatics up to the perfect human beings, and all are known as prajas. Lord Brahma, the creator of this particular universe, is known as the Prajapati because he is the grandfather of all who have taken birth. Thus, praja is used in a broader sense than it is now used. The king represents all living beings, the aquatics, the plants, trees, reptiles, birds, animals, and man. Every one of them is a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. And the king, being the representative of the Supreme Lord, is duty bound to give proper protection to every one of them. This is not the case with the presidents and dictators of this demoralized system of administration, where the lower animals are given no protection, while the higher animals are given so called protection. But this is a great science which can be learned only by one who knows the science of Krishna. By knowing the science of Krishna, one can become the most perfect man in the world. Unless one has knowledge in this science, all qualifications and doctorate diplomas acquired by academic education are spoiled and useless. Maharaj Yudhishthira knew this science of Krishna very well. For it is stated here that by continuous cultivation of this service, or by continuous devotional service to Lord Krishna, he acquired the qualification of administering the state. The father is sometimes seemingly cruel to the son, but that does not mean that the father has lost the qualification to be a father. A father is always a father because he always has the good of the son at heart. The father wants every one of his sons to become a better man than himself. Therefore, a king like Maharaj Yudhishthir, who was the personality goodness, wanted everyone under his administration, especially human beings who have better developed consciousness, to become devotees of Lord Krishna so that everyone can become free from the trifles of material existence. His motto of administration was all good for the citizens, for as personified goodness, he knew perfectly well what is actually good for them. He conducted the administration on that principle and not on the Rakshasi demonic principle of sense gratification. As an ideal king, he had no personal ambition, and there was no place for sense gratification, because all his senses at all times were engaged in loving service of the Supreme Lord, which includes the partial service to the living beings who form the parts and parcels of the complete whole. Those who are busy rendering service to the parts and parcels, leaving aside the whole, only spoil time and energy, as one does when watering the leaves of a tree without watering the roots. If water is poured on the root, the leaves are enlivened perfectly and automatically. But if water is poured on the leaves only, the whole energy is spoiled. Maharaj Yudhishthira, therefore, was constantly engaged in the service of the Lord, and thus the parts and parcels of the Lord, the living beings under his careful administration, were perfectly attended with all comforts in this life and all progress in the next. That is the way of perfect management of state administration. Wow. Text 5. News even reached the celestial planets about Maharaj Yudhishthir's worldly possessions, the sacrifices by which he would attain a better destination, his queen, his stalwart brothers, his extensive land, his sovereignty over the planet Earth, and his fame, etc. Purport. Only a rich and great man's name and fame are known all over the world, and the name and fame of Maharaj Yudhishthir reached the higher planets because of his good administration, worldly possessions, glorious wife Draupadi, the strength of his brothers Bhima and Arjuna, and his solid sovereign power over the world known as Jambudweep. Here, the word lokaha is significant. There are different lokas, or higher planets, scattered all over the sky, both material and spiritual. A person can reach them by dint of his work in the present life, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 9.25. No forceful entrance is allowed there. The tiny material scientists and engineers who have discovered vehicles to travel over a few thousand miles in outer space will not be allowed entrance. That is not the way to reach the better planets. One must qualify himself to enter into such happy planets by sacrifice and service. Those who are sinful in every step of life can expect only to be degraded. Those who are sinful in every step of life can expect only to be degraded into animal life, to suffer more and more the pangs of material existence. And this is also stated in Bhagavad Gita 16:19. Maharaj Yudhishthira's good sacrifices and qualifications were so lofty and virtuous that even the residents of the higher celestial planets were already prepared to receive him as one of them. Text 6. O Brahmanas, the opulence of the king was so enchanting that the denizens of heaven aspired for it. But because he was absorbed in the service of the Lord, nothing could satisfy him except the Lord's service. Purport. There are two things in the world which can satisfy living beings. When one is materially engrossed, he is satisfied only by sense gratification. But when one is liberated from the conditions of the material modes, he is satisfied only by rendering loving service for the satisfaction of the Lord. This means that the living being is constitutionally a servitor, and not one who is served. Being illusioned by the conditions of the external energy, one falsely thinks himself to be the served, and actually he is not served, he is servant of the senses, like lust, desire, anger, avarice, pride, madness, and intolerance. When one when one is in his proper senses by attainment of spiritual knowledge, he realizes that he is not the master of the material world, but is only a servant of the senses. As long as at that time he begs for the service of the Lord, and thus becomes happy without being illusioned by so-called material happiness. Maharaj Yudhishthira was one of the liberated souls, and therefore for him there is no pleasure in a vast kingdom, good wife, obedient brothers, happy subjects, and prosperous world. These blessings automatically follow for a pure devotee, even though the devotee does not aspire for them. The example set herein is exactly suitable. It is said that one who is hungry is never satisfied by anything other than food. The whole material world is full of hungry living beings. The hunger is not for good food, shelter, or sense gratification. The hunger is for the spiritual atmosphere. Due to ignorance only, they think that the world is dissatisfied because there is not sufficient food, shelter, defense, and objects of sense gratification. This is called illusion. When the living being is hungry for spiritual satisfaction, he is misrepresented by material hunger. But the foolish leaders cannot see that even the people who are most sumptuously materially satisfied are still hungry. And what is their hunger and poverty? This hunger is actually for spiritual food, spiritual shelter, spiritual defense, and spiritual sense gratification. Hmm. These can be obtained in the association of the Supreme Spirit, Lord Shri Krishna, and therefore one who has them cannot be attracted by the so-called food, shelter, defense, and sense gratification of the material world, even if they are relished by the denizens of the heavenly planets. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita 8:16, it is said by the Lord that even in the topmost planet of the universe, in the Brahmaloka, where the duration of life is multiplied by millions of years, by earth calculation, one cannot satisfy his hunger. Such hunger can be satisfied only when the living being is situated in immortality, which is attained in the spiritual sky, far, far above the Brahmaloka. In the association of Lord Mukunda, the Lord who awards his devotees the transcendental pleasure of liberation. Om Tat Sat.